Yesterday, federal prosecutors in New York announced that the operators of a global online currency exchange, similar to PayPal, called Liberty Reserve, ran a $6 billion money laundering operation, which acted as a central hub for criminals trafficking in everything from child porn to identity theft. On Friday, officials in Spain arrested Liberty Reserve founder Arthur Budofsky, who's among 7 people arrested and charged in the case. So it looks like those responsible for the biggest online cyber money laundering case in history will be held criminally accountable for their actions. If only the same thing could be said for big corporate money launderers like big banks like HSBC. Back in December of last year, the Department of Justice and the U.S. Treasury officials announced that HSBC, the world's largest bank and the second largest bank in the United States, had laundered money for some of the most notorious international drug cartels in the world, while also illegally conducting transactions on behalf of customers in Iran, Libya, Cuba, Sudan, and Burma. Between 2006 and 2009, according to federal officials, HSBC failed to monitor, nice euphemism, a staggering $670 billion in wire transfers and an additional $9.4 billion in cash transactions from their operations in Mexico. As a result, according to officials, at least $881 million in drug trafficking money, including money from the Sinaloa cartel of Mexico and the Norte de Valle cartel of Colombia, was laundered through that big bank. The Department of Justice also said that HSBC helped process $660 million in illegal transactions from Iran, Cuba, Sudan, Libya, and Burma, all intentionally done by hiding the identities of those countries. At the initial news conference announcing the bust, Assistant U.S. Attorney General Lanny Breuer said that HSBC is being held accountable for stunning failures of oversight. The record of dysfunction that prevailed at HSBC for many years was astonishing. So what does he mean by being held accountable for failures of oversight? Well, it means sending banksters who helped to perpetrate a bloody drug war and perpetuate it and laundered billions for drug kingpins not to jail. Being held accountable means signing a deferred prosecution agreement, a DPA, with the Department of Justice, under which no criminal charges will be brought against the bank or any of its banksters, provided that they meet certain conditions. Those conditions include paying a $1.9 billion fine, less than 1% of the total amount of money that the bank helped to launder. Despite laundering hundreds of billions of dollars illegally, dealing with some of the world's most notorious drug cartels, allegedly laundering for terrorist groups and moving money for customers in nations that the U.S. has no diplomatic ties with, HSBC is getting off with a slap on the wrist from the Department of Justice. And HSBC isn't the only big bank that's been under fire for money laundering. J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, and Bank of America have all been investigated for money laundering in the past couple of years, and all have gotten away with a slap on the wrist. How is it that big banks that launder billions and billions of dollars for criminals haven't seen a single perp walk, but an online company can have its CEO arrested and prosecuted along with several of his executives? It's because Liberty Reserve isn't a real bank. So its employees aren't real banksters, so they can't hide millions in campaign contributions to American politicians. Since the executives at Liberty Reserve weren't the anointed elite of the Jamie Dimons and Lloyd Blankfeins of the world, they'll face the full force of the American justice system. Right now, we have 2 criminal justice systems in America. One for wealthy elite, corporations and banksters, and the second one for everyone else. Thanks to this double standard, corporations like Walmart that dump toxic waste get off with a fine. But if an American citizen, an actual human being, did the exact same thing, they'd face years in jail. It's time to end the double standard. Corporations and big banks need to be held accountable for their actions just like everyone else. Banksters who launder money for drug cartels and hostile foreign nations need to be facing jail time and not just a slap on the wrist. Back in the 1980s, after Ronald Reagan deregulated the S&Ls and they therefore predictably went on a binge of illegal activity and then collapsed, Reagan investigated and prosecuted thousands of banksters and sent several hundred banksters to prison. Most famous was Charles Keating, who went to jail even though he'd been giving huge payoffs to the infamous Keating 5 senators, including John McCain. If Reagan could send politically connected banksters to jail, President Obama and his administration can do it too. Time to let some potheads out of jail and warm up the cells for the banksters.